Hello, everyone. I'm excited to have Brian Sanders with me today on the show. Brian is the author of the new book, just came out, The 6 Seasons of Calling, Discovering Your Purpose in Each Stage of Life. Brian is a social entrepreneur. He has helped to start hundreds of missional enterprises, including churches, nonprofits, and businesses around the world. He holds multiple degrees in communication, master's in religious studies, another master's in applied theology from Spurgeon's College. Brian has lived in intentional community in the inner city for more than 20 years, embodying the ideas that drive him. He lives in Tampa, Florida right now with his wife, Monica, and their 6 children. Hi, Brian. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
Hey, it's good to be here. That sounds better than it really is, probably. Thanks for the introduction.
That's right. That is a lot of school. So I'm passionate about this topic of calling for many reasons. First, because when I was in university, I had no clue what I wanted to do. I went to college. I was accepted into the School of Science. And within that program, there were many majors like physics and biology, chemistry, and there was computer science. And the first day of orientation, they literally asked me what my major was. And on a whim, I chose computer science. Didn't think much about it. I ended up hating it, switching majors. So I just thought that there's got to be a better way to do this and understand our life's calling. As you say in the book, there are different seasons, different days. So this topic is near and dear to my heart, and I enjoyed your book, took some notes, and I think it applies to people of all different ages. So tell me first, why did you write this book, and what was the problem that you saw that needed to be solved?
Well, I come from a community of activists, missionary type people who, we started something about 16 years ago called the Underground Network, and it's sort of a way of designing or forming the church around missional communities, or what we would call micro churches. And so we're just a community rich with leaders and with people that have to have a sense of their calling. In other words, to be a part of the underground, you had to know to whom you had been sent, like to where you were called, because that's what we did. We formed these communities and we went on mission in certain places. So that notion of the vertical of God sort of saying, I've given you this assignment, this place in the world that I want you to work or labor or love people, or be a light or witness or whatever. It was effectively the doorway into our community. You had to have that. But what I realized over time, watching these people walking with all of these kind of leaders over longer periods of time, decades, because we would have known them even when they were students. So we're talking a span of about 25 years, that calling wasn't so simple. It wasn't something that was static, that stayed put. And that feeling we had when we were 24, we were saying, God, who am I, and what have you called me for, and where are you sending me? It changed when they're 30 or 40. And to some people that created a kind of existential crisis. Is something wrong with me? Am I not faithful anymore to God? Am I missing God? Am I disobedient because he told me at 24 I was supposed to go to those people at that place and I'm not there anymore because I've got 3 children of my own, or I've gotten married, or I have a mortgage, or whatever. So I think probably in there is just a response to my own community, which is hundreds of leaders that are now traversing a lifetime of leadership, multiple decades of leadership, and realizing calling is not so simple. Maybe more to the point, it's dynamic. It changes with us. Because God is dynamic, because God is not rigid or stiff. He's walking with us through the changes of our lives. Yeah.
I think the church, I don't know if it's a church or just popular Christian teaching, is that we kind of pray and then God gives us that one call. But that's often not the case. So that's why I really like the idea of seasons. I mean, don't you think that creates a lot of pressure to have that, to find out, like, what is that one call and why, God, can't I hear it? I mean, that just seems, that kind of thinking, without the idea of it changing, that there's one calling, would give us way too much pressure to discover that. Can you speak into that?
Yeah, and even the pressure when we feel it. So part of what I'm doing is this kind of psychosocial development taxonomy, sort of looking at we grow over time. We learn things. We hopefully we're a better version of ourselves, 10, 20, 30 years into our adulthood than we were when we started. And so we, not only is that pressurizing, but it's pressurizing at a point in our lives, in our early 20s or whatever, when we don't need that kind of pressure. It's not healthy. It's not helpful to us to be able to answer that. I mean, your story of being asked, which we all were, in college, what's your, to know your major, is essentially saying, can you predict what you want to do for the rest of your life? Can you have that kind of level of specificity? And the truth is, I would make the argument that we're not ready to do that at 19 years old. We're not developmentally ready to do that, and nor should we be asked to do that, actually, because we don't know enough about ourselves to be able to answer the question, what is it that I'm designed for the full duration of my life? So this is why part of what I'm trying to do is maybe ease that tension, release that pressure, but also realize actually there is something you're called to in your 20s, and it's to learn about yourself. It's to try lots of things. It's to learn to work on a team. It's to learn to be under someone else's leadership, so that you can, I would argue, in your sort of mid-30s, make your mark on the world, have more clarity about who you are. So it's not that we never come to that conclusion, but when you're sort of expected, or when it's healthy developmentally to come to that conclusion, I think that requires a little more thinking.
Yeah, I have a lot to ask too about what you just said. So good. But first, I just want to make sure, how are you using this word calling? I know there's different definitions. Yeah, what's your version?
So for me, I think calling has, well, of course, first of all, calling implies a voice. It implies a person. And so it's possible that we can secularize the idea of calling. It's used everywhere. Even people with no faith position would say, yeah, I have a calling to be a teacher or a nurse or something like that. Or I found my calling, or I'm looking for a calling. And so I probably want to take that back in the mystical sense, in the sense of like prayer and listening to the voice of God, who's a real person who loves you and knows you. And so the two primary connotations of calling for me are intimacy, that is to say, God first calls us to himself. So if I shout your name, there's a voice, there's a person calling, there's a sound that's heard or perceived somehow. But it means I know you. It means I know your name. It means I want you to come to me first. Come over towards me. It implies relationship. And that's, I mean, on its own, that's sort of breathtaking, that God would know us at that level, know us by name, and want us first, to just come to me, want us, want relationship with us. But then, once we come to him, first connotation of calling, he has something for us to do. There's maybe some assignment, some purpose, some significance. So I think the two deepest longings of the human heart are to be known, intimacy, and for our lives to matter, significance, purpose. And in calling, I think you potentially have both built in there. So there is something he probably wants to whisper in our ear and say, in my mission in the world, my love for this world, there's something in particular I want you to do, or have for you to do, that maybe possibly only you can do in the world, which is a remarkable idea too, that he loves us, knows us, but also there's something that you uniquely can do and are meant to do that no one else can. So that's what I mean when I say calling.
Yeah, it's good. I think a lot of people need to hear that God does have something for you to do, and that he does love you, and he has first called you to himself. I mean, that is huge. So back to this idea of when you're in your 20s. So let's say that you have you're trying to hear the caller, and we've kind of already said that, maybe your 20s is not the best time to, decide what you will do the rest of your life, even though I think it's possible. What would you say to someone in their 20s? I think in the book, you mentioned to try different experiences, meet with different people, try different roles, because people spend a lot of money on college. I mean, I don't know what the average college degree costs now, 30, 40, 50, $100,000. It is a lot of money. So how would you advise someone in their 20s who wants to find their calling, doesn't want to drop $100K on college if they don't know what they're supposed to do in life?
Yeah. So I would say day 1, 0 to 12, that's child. Day 2 is student. But I would say that 12 to 24, which would include college, actually, is really adolescence. So we're talking neuroscience. We're saying when is the sort of adolescent brain finished? The prefrontal cortex is fully formed, fully developed. It's about 24. It's about 24, 25 years old. So it's not just that teenagers are brain damaged. It's that there's like the fullness of even your executive function, the frontal cortex of your brain, which makes decisions, which can plan the future, isn't really finished. So if we can put college or those years into the day of learning, essentially, just your call is just to be a student. And if you can squeeze that into high school and secondary school and primary school and those experiences, then you're freed up a little bit. And then I would say the day 3, 24 to 36, that early career, that first professional step you take into the world, it's about getting as much experience as you can, learning as much as you can, being a part of a really healthy, functioning team, like choosing something. So probably the most important decision you make in your 20s is where you want to work, and not because it's forever, you're forever home as a career, but because it's a great place to learn, a healthy place to be a part of, a worthy mission somehow. So to pick a company or a community that you think, I like what they're trying to do. It seems good for the world or whatever. And then, of course, a healthy environment where you can grow and learn and try new things. And to me, that stage of being a servant, essentially learning how to serve, learning how to serve a boss, a team, learning how to serve a company's mission, that is really about the formation of character. So what I would say to 20-somethings is, don't rush to figure out what you're meant to do, the contribution you're meant to make. Try to figure out who you are, and that's still in flux. You're still trying to discern both your skills and your gifts, but also, are you trustworthy? Are you honest? These are the things I think we forge in the fire of that first, decade or so of work life.
Right. So that character is obviously just as important as finding your vocation. I mean, do you think that's taught enough for a lot, or is it sort of just push? Just find a job and character growth will kind of come along the way?
No, there's a guy. What's his name? I forget. I think out of University of North Carolina, wrote a book called The Death of Character, and essentially the idea is, we have. You used to become a celebrity, sort of famous, because of something that you accomplished, and now in the world in which we live, people are famous for being famous. They're essentially famous for being, interesting, or for entertaining us or something like that. So I think the loss of that, one potential loss of that, is that we are rushing young people to sort of make their mark in the world, to start their great, world-beating enterprise in their early 20s, and that's probably not going to happen. So first of all, that's an anomalous story, which makes everyone just depressed then, because you're 28, you're looking around, well, what if I didn't start Facebook, I haven't started Apple. What am I doing with my life, So you shouldn't be depressed probably. But then, God forbid, you actually are really successful in your early 20s. And this goes for ministry too. People that rushed into sort of platform ministry in their early 20s, and they haven't forged that character. They haven't fought for their holiness in a place of prayer or servanthood or even suffering at some level, of learning submission, of learning surrender. And if you don't have that character inside you and you're rushed into leadership, well, look, I mean, we have loads of stories right now, cautionary tales of leaders that have disappointed us. And we look over there going, man, what a disaster church leadership seems to be. And in almost all of those cases, you're talking about people that were rushed into leadership at a very young age, rushed into like high level. I'm not saying we can't lead in our 20s. Of course, you should be leading things. But sort of at the top of the food chain and the hierarchy. And it's because there wasn't enough time. There's no cheat code here. There's no way around time, experience, and character. Learning and humility, learning to serve, to be a servant. So before you can be a leader, this is my opinion, this is my conviction, before you can be a leader, you must learn to be a servant. And reversing those two things is really hard to do.
Why is that? That was actually one of my questions. Why is it so important to learn how to serve before we lead? Because there's always seminars on leadership, on how to lead this and how to lead that. But I don't see too many servant seminars. I don't see too many conferences for servants. But what will people miss? I know that there's sin and there's some big things that you can struggle with. But besides a huge moral failure, what are some things that people will lack by not learning to, as you say in the book, taking time to serve someone else's vision and developing that servant heart?
I mean, look, fundamentally, I think it's about humility. I mean, so to me, that what the ancients called the chief of all virtues. So actually, in the forging of character, the virtue that rises above all other virtues, in other words, how do you learn virtues except through humility? And so, and even like James and John and Peter, for example, two very different stories in the New Testament, both in their epistles come to this word for word little mantra that they learn, which is God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. It's probably a lesson they had to learn the hard way, So if you think of it that way, okay, if like a proud person, a proud agency, a proud approach, it elicits opposition from God. It's like he's sort of like, I have to, if it's going to be about you and creating you as a rival to me and as a rival to my glory in the world or whatever, I just can't help you, But if you'll be humble, if you'll learn, Philippians 2, Jesus himself humbled himself, made himself nothing. Even though he was himself God, he did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself a servant. So in the perfection of Jesus, in the Godhead, he chooses to become a servant. And then he teaches his disciples, listen, look over how the Gentiles do this leadership thing. Like, they lord it over people. They say, I'm in charge, you're beneath me. Not so with you. Don't ever do that. What a timeless word that just echoes through every single generation of the church. Just don't do that. Do not lead like that. To be great in my kingdom, you must first be the servant of all. So, man, is there a teaching in Jesus that's more ignored, in Christian leadership approach? And to your point, where are the seminars on servanthood? But I think as a young person, it's not that we're not called to lead. We are called to lead, but we're called to lead first as servant. We have to understand ourselves fundamentally. This is what happens, I think, in day 3, as a servant. the not just a posture or a tactic of servanthood or servant leadership as a tactic to get people to do what you want or to be a more effective leader or something like that. But I see myself as the servant of the people around me, as a servant of God, as a servant of the thing that God has called me to do. And then when you lead, the way you lead is totally different. It feels different. It sounds different. It's experienced differently from people. And again, I just think reversing that is really problematic. There's a guy in 1969, I think 1969, wrote a book. A guy called Robert Greenleaf wrote a book called Servant Leadership. Not a Christian, not even really reflecting on Jesus, although it's obviously his idea. And he just says, look, in this tumultuous time, the late 60s in America, he said the only kind of leader that people are going to follow is a servant leader. And he made the argument that he would rather start with what he called a natural servant that you teach to lead than a natural leader that's trying to learn servanthood. He said kind of the second thing is very difficult. And so you'd rather look for a natural servant, and then you can teach them leadership. You can teach them leadership is like a way to pull people into something. But that natural servanthood is key. And I personally think every believer, every disciple of Jesus should, in that sense, become a natural servant.
Yeah, because you can work with humility. Working with pride is next to impossible. Yeah, and so I think this idea of character growth before leading is huge. But we live in this world where people want to be famous on YouTube, on they want to have their huge following on Instagram, social media. And the temptation, as what we are talking about, is to try to be famous. There's nothing wrong with being famous, but without that character growth, causes so many problems. And I want to get into this, your book, 6 Seasons of Calling. We've been talking, I think, about day 2, day 3. Can you go through briefly the 6 seasons and why it's important to come at this idea of calling from that perspective?
Yeah, so okay, I'm arguing there's sort of 6 major transitions in a typical developmental life. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's 4 or 7, or I don't know, but there's not one. I guess this is my point: is that calling doesn't just come to us once in our life. That our lives change, we grow, and there's going to be this sort of dynamic realization. So I love the image of the creation of the world in 6 days, and that is a sort of motif or metaphor for what we create with those 6 days we're given in our life, the span of creative time that we're given on this earth, And so if you think of it that way, and then you just break it down into 12-year segments, 0 to 12, day 1, 12 to 24, day 2, and so on. So you think of your creative life. Then, of course, day 7 is rest. It's reward. It's eternity. To leave this world and be in union, full union with God. So, yeah, and then I see them as cumulative. I see them as what we learn in each day, what God is sort of teaching us in each day. We don't lose that. We don't lose that sense of identity. We add to it. We build on it. So for me, day 1, 0 to 12, is about being a child. And it's probably the only day where what you are is all you're meant to be. You don't need to be.
I loved when you said that. Yeah, in the book, I think I highlighted that one. So,
it probably rings true when you see a child in the fullness of their childhood, their childishness. You realize that they're representing something for Jesus. They represent the kingdom and so on. And actually, where we hurt kids is when we pull them out of their childhood too soon, either through abuse or trauma, neglect, or through driving them into something. So to learn to be a child is something you keep for the rest of your life. So if you're 70, you're still remembering, I'm a child of God. You still are a son or a daughter of God, and that's a key part of your identity that you build on. Then I think day 2, 12 to 24, you're talking about being a student. your work, your job, your calling, as an adolescent is to learn. And part of how we learn is to challenge the world around us, to push back, to say, is this real? Does this really work?
Mm-hmm.
And we do that with our parents. We test ideas, we'll test our faith, all of that. So it's not just school, but it's actually touching and feeling the world. What is real? What is right? What is true? And then I think 24 to 36, that day 3 is about being, as we've talked about, being a servant and learning, not just learning to serve, but learning about yourself in the act of serving. So if the adolescent, the student is learning about the world, what is real, what's there, then the day 3 servant is really learning about themselves. And then I would say day 4, 36, 48, that's kind of the height of your career probably. That's where you are called to be a maker, a creator, to you finally know who you are, essentially. You know what you're good at, you know what you're not. It's probably time to double down on what you're good at and stop doing what you're not good at. So in your 20s, you shouldn't. You should do lots of things you're not good at because you're discovering yourself, But in your 30s, you probably should push away from things that you're not particularly fruitful in. And you probably find 1 or 2 things that maybe only you could do, some unique contribution you can bring to the world. So I like the word maker. And then 48 to 60, day 5, I'll call that mentor, the call to actually reduce your life a little bit and start working through others. So all that you built or grew or created in day 4, in day 5, you give that away. And so you start seeing your experience, your knowledge, your love for people, your wisdom, you start giving it away. You start working and seeing your life expressed through others. And then, of course, day 6, the last day, and that can be well beyond 72, but 60 and on is what I would call mystic. And the focus of the end of life, where one foot is in this world and one foot is preparing for the next, is about mystery and love. These are the 2 obsessions of day 6. Is actually to let go of certain things, to begin to prepare our hearts and minds for our eternal home. So those are the 6.
So what would you say to someone, because of course it would be great to go to those in order. Day, I guess day 1 we can, and day 2 we're probably not going to skip. But as far as like professionally, let's say someone's in day 4. They didn't have the opportunities in their 20s. They didn't, or maybe they didn't take the opportunities. And they regret not trying different things, trying different roles. So now they're stuck. Maybe they have a mortgage and they have a family, and they look back and go, man, I kind of skipped day 3 or day 2, kind of the second half of day 2. Day 3, I am stuck in a job that is paying the bills, but it's not what I feel like I am called to do. Can people go back and relive that? Or what would you say to someone who didn't fully develop the previous days and wants to get back on track?
I do think, I've been discussing this with a group of people. We've been kind of walking through that, and that question keeps coming up. And I do think that, on the one hand, it's another iteration of God's power to heal, maybe, or to restore something which was lost or never attained. I do think that there is the possibility of a restored childhood, a restored adolescence, a restored servant heart or posture. I mean, obviously you can't go back and relive those days. You can't get in a time machine, but and again, to look back on our life with a sense of regret, if you have humility, actually then you may have learned the lesson you need. So, if someone's in a dead-end job in their 20s and they feel like, oh, I didn't get to try lots of things, I would say, actually, you probably did. And you learned a lot about yourself even through that process. So for me, it's about paying attention to your life. And then when you hit that crisis, which we all do multiple times in our lives, where we go, who am I now? Who am I now that I'm divorced, or my kids have all left home, or I just got a cancer diagnosis, or I don't know, some, or I got a promotion or something. Who am I now as I move to a new city or something like that? That crisis, that existential dread of not
Mm,
knowing. I was comfortable now. I don't. Then now I don't know who I am. What that does is that drives us into a place of prayer again. It drives us into a place of hearing God say, "This is who you are. This is what I've made you for, and this is now what I'm calling you to the next season." And look, that's like the sun coming up over your life. It's like
right.
it's a dawn. And so when you're 60 and you have that experience again, it's a new day. So whatever didn't happen in the previous day, it
Mm,
becomes not irrelevant, but less important than the fact that you feel a sense of destiny and hope for the next season of your life. And look, I'm seeing 60-year-olds who are just as pumped about what's coming in
mm,
their life as
that is
20 year
cool.
olds, because they're realizing, oh, God hasn't left me behind, and actually where I am now is a beginning, actually, of something. It's the beginning of something. So this is another value of seeing these days. Yeah, you have to go through the nighttime in between the days, the confusion, the transition, but the newness of it makes everything, it's a renaissance for your life. So you don't have to look back and go, I don't have that, or I didn't experience that, or it's terrible. It's like, well, you're in day 5 now, and this is a brand new, it's a do-over, for your life.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's amen that we serve a redeeming God, and God can make all things new, whether you're 26 or you're 60. So that's awesome. So you alluded to this cycle of calling, and I'm going to read a quote, and you say that the search for calling usually begins with a crisis. Why is that? And can you talk about this identity and intimacy cycle that you listed? I was fascinated by that because I do believe that those are often wake up times for us to reassess life. Where are we going? What am I doing? But yeah, talk a little bit about the calling cycle in your book.
Yeah, so we probably become complacent when we have clarity on our identity. So it's like, I know who I am. I'm a father, or I'm a worker at this company, or whatever. Um, and you just sort of do that. But then when something changes, something shakes that from its
Mm,
moorings, then you're stuck. Look, I mean, the classic example is the empty nester. There's somebody who's kid, you've been raising kids for 20 years, and or longer, and it's just who you are. It's who you understand everything you do.
mm,
Because I raised 6 kids. Going to a restaurant, for example, was just like, this is a lot of money. You have to calculate, to paying for 8. So it's like whatever restaurant you go to, it's times 8. So we just hardly ever went out to eat. Now I have one kid left. I have the 13-year-old Zoon left, and I'm like, let's go out to eat. Every day I'm like, let's go out to eat. This is like, we're just flush with money here or something.
yeah.
So, but those big life changes, they can make you go, man. You're looking at your wife, all the kids are gone, and you're going, who are you? Like,
Mhm.
let me reintroduce myself to you, and what is this house like now without the kids, and who are we, and what are we
Mhm.
now that we have all this time and all and this sort of mental openness? What does it mean? It could be sad, or it could be full of hope and curiosity and so on. But it always starts with the question about, who am I now? Because
Mm.
my identity was tied up in what I was doing, right? And so I think what that's meant to do, and the reason why it's really healthy, and not something to be afraid of or to avoid, but it's something to embrace in the darkness and the confusion of, I don't know what's next for me. I don't know who I'm supposed to be in this next phase of life. That drives us to prayer. Just like
Yeah.
when we were 20 and we were going, God, who am I? And how can you possibly use me in the world? And what am I supposed to be? And what am I supposed to do? That same energy can be brought into all of these transitions, all of these days of our life. We say, God, who am I now? And that intimacy that we find in the place of prayer, where you turn to the only one that knows the answer. You
Yeah.
can't get that answer from anyone besides God. And then he assures you about so I think it's like crisis, and then intimacy, and then some sort of identity renewal or assurance, where God says, "Don't. This is who I made you to be. This is who you are to me." And then out of that comes fresh purpose, a new word for you, like go do this. This is the next thing I want you to do. And then we feel kind of free again to go chase something. And I would say that lasts about a decade, about 12 years. And
Yeah.
you'll be right back there again going, now what? Who am I now? And that's all very healthy.
Yeah, and normal and healthy. And what you were saying, these crises drive us to our knees and to pray. And back to the humility thing, I'm thinking about Jesus as you mentioned in the Garden of Gethsemane. Besides suffering on the cross, this was Jesus's most excruciating night. And related to this, you say, and I quote, that indifference toward your own will, coupled with passionate commitment to His, this is the key to discerning the voice of God. And I thought that was really a good point that you had made in the book, that even Jesus had to come to terms with, Lord, not my will, but your will be done. So I'm going to talk about this idea of total abandonment to hear the voice of God, because I was raised in the Roman Catholic Church. And one summer, my mom took me to a Protestant church. Now, you were not supposed to do that then or now, but I finally went. And I finally went to this church. And it was like an evangelical church. And this pastor was talking about recklessly abandoning yourself to Jesus. Like if you were walking up to this cliff of faith, you had to jump off in faith and God will catch you. Now, I did not make a commitment to Christ after I heard that sermon, but I knew, man, like that was far out there. I had not heard of that. And that stuck with me, this idea of recklessly abandoning yourself to God. So you talk about that in the book, and I appreciated that. But why specifically does it take us coming to this point where you're like, God, anything that you want, I will do? Does it always take that, or God uses us kind of when we're at the end of our rope?
We probably stumble into the will of God all the time by accident, and just because He's gracious and guiding us without our knowledge, probably. But if you set out to hear His voice, if you lock yourself away in the place of prayer and you think, I really want to know, should I take this job, or should I marry this girl, or should I, move to this country or something like that, some big decision, which we all have, the course of our lives. And people say, I don't know how to hear God. So, my advice is this sort of ancient practice of the prayer of indifference, which is you really can't. You're unlikely to hear clearly an answer as long as you have a bias towards hearing one thing or another. Some people are masochistic, right? So they think, well, I think God is telling me to do the thing I want, so that can't be right. He must not want me to have what I want, Or the opposite, you're just sort of playing games with God, and you know what you want, and so you imagine hearing what it is you want to hear, so you can go off and say, yeah, I'm doing God's will, but it's really just what you want. So how do you free yourself from that, from your own desire, essentially? I think the way that you do that is by not caring about the answer either way, and basically saying, I can do A or I can do B, and I'm happy with either answer. You're truly objective, you're truly open. But then the question is, how do you come to that? You can't just be apathetic. You're not a stoic. I just reading 1 Corinthians 13 again, which is really a treatise against stoicism. It's against passionless life. Him saying, if I can fathom all mysteries but have not love, I'm nothing. That's a dig on the Stoics. That's a way of saying, no, you have to have love, you have to have passion, and so on. So how do I have passion for my life, have strong desire and feeling, but feel open to either choice equally? And I think the only way to do that is to become so obsessed, so fascinated so in love again with the person of Jesus, to just say, you're the thing I want. And that takes time, that takes worship, and maybe it'll take you hours, maybe it'll take you minutes, I don't know, but when you can get to the place where you say, Lord, to look upon you is all I really need in this life. And if I can please you and know you and walk with you, that is enough for me. That's all I really have ever wanted. That is my deepest desire. And then you can put that dilemma on the table and say, and really honestly feel in your heart great love for God and great openness to say, Lord, I'm happy to marry that girl or not. I'm happy to move to that country or not. I'm happy to take that job or not. I'll do whatever you want. And to me, it's in that point where you feel that sense of devotion and freedom, openness to choose either thing, that you can hear. And whatever you hear in that moment, by faith, trust it. Go with it.
Yeah. And I think you're saying about worshiping, starting off with worship, because I think that often worship will reveal our idols. Like, what are we hanging on to? What are the things that I must have at ultimate cost? But that worshiping, coming in with and just putting your hands open and saying, Lord, like, not my will, but your will be done. I think that's a beautiful place to hear God's voice. You were saying that you use this material to develop your leaders too. How does this book help you develop future and current leaders?
Well, I think as a tool for so a lot of what 21st century leadership looks like is of course we talked about servanthood, but it looks like coaching. So as a tactical move, leaders, it's less about direction and saying, here's what you need to go do, or here's this hill we're going to take. Come on, get behind me. We're going to go take this hill. I would say probably 21st century leadership looks a lot like coming alongside somebody and saying, who has God created you to be? And how can I help you get there? And what has he put in your heart? And how can you be faithful to that? And how can I inspire you, spur you on towards that? So in that sense, as a way of thinking, all taxonomies, all personality typologies, all those things, they're only helpful in the sense that they locate us somewhere. So in other words, if you're coaching me, let's say, and I'm telling you, this is what I'm struggling with, this is what I'm trying to figure out, it's a matter of can we locate me somewhere on a journey, on a continuum, on a growth trajectory or something like that, and realizing, oh, this is where you are, this is where you are, and so this is probably what you need to do at this point, but also this is where you've come from, and this might be where you're going. So I think that's where something like this can be helpful, is to see a lot of the angst that we feel, the confusion and the frustration because we think something's wrong with us or our life is broken. And to realize, A, you're not alone, that probably people your age or in the phase of life you're in are experiencing something very similar. And so that's comforting and relieving to realize that. But then also to have a pathway forward, to think, so maybe these are the questions you would ask. So one of the things I do in the book is actually give developmental threats in each day of life, to actually say, watch out for this sin, for this temptation in this day. It's not just all growth and rainbows and unicorns. It's threat, and there's ways in which our lives break down in each of these phases and days. So I think developmentally, as a leader of leaders, or somebody working with a leader, or working with somebody who's trying to grow, to recognize, hey, watch out for this. You're probably going to face, and there are other things besides what I've identified, but I think that's probably another tool, a way that it could be used as a tool.
Why is it so hard to find a mentor? Maybe it's easier for women than for guys. I don't know. You can, make a comment and let me know what you think. But I've had some great mentors over the years, and I've had some ones that we get together and they talk about themselves and their war stories for the last 30 years. So I end up, listening for like 30, 40 minutes where I'm like, hey, I thought it's supposed to be about me. So maybe you can answer that. Like,
that's not a mentor, yeah.
how would you speak into that? Do you think it's difficult for men to find other solid men to speak into these things? Because I think we live in a world where there's a lot of absent dads and or father-son relationships that are strained. How would a young man go about finding someone to walk alongside of them?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think that's a really difficult, profound question, but I do think that there is a kind of marginalization of day 6 people, so 60 to 72, for example. Because you have moved out of maybe direct leadership, or you're not running the company anymore, or so you're not the center of your world in that way anymore, and that can be, as I talk about, that can be very lonely. It can be isolating in a way that's can make us sad or confused, but the marginalization of those people. So people in day 5, for example, that are trying to take the hill, they're trying to do something great, whatever. They desperately feel the need for spiritual fathers and mothers. They desperately feel the need for people that they can look to, that believe in them, that pour into them, that support them, and give them advice and wisdom and so on. And so it's this sad reality that the 42-year-old is like, man, if only I had someone older in my life, and the 65, 70-year-old is going, I don't have anyone to pour into.
Yeah.
So it's something really, diabolical there, where the enemy is keeping us apart, and it could go both ways. So I would say day 6 people, go look for some 40-year-olds to say, hey, can I just pray for you, walk with you, support you, buy you breakfast once a month or something? Because I know what it's like to walk through this time. I know about the perils and the challenges and the dangers and the adrenaline of the whole thing, And then likewise, also somebody at the height of their career should be looking around for a 70-year-old and should say, hey, will you pour into me? And I think there's a real marriage there that could be a blessing to both. But in other words, old people who are very old, we just marginalize them, and just in our view of society and success and all that, we just kind of marginalize them, and we don't look to them. We don't tell the story of super successful 70-year-olds. We want to tell the story of the very young tycoon, captain of industry, whatever. And so there's something also culturally wrong there, where we're not seeing the value in people that have all this wisdom, all this love stored in them. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's people in day 6 that are immature and will just talk to you about themselves because they're lonely, and they're not emotionally healthy, or they're not. So of course there's healthy people and unhealthy people in every stage, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's on both of us, to kind of look for each other and ask for that relationship.
I think so. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's good advice. And I'll just reiterate what you said. If you're 60, 70, day 6, go find some young bucks. Some, maybe some not so young bucks in their mid 40s, and I think. People they don't want to be rejected or feel weird, but I've always welcomed older men speaking into older men and women speaking into my life. So that is good advice. Last question as we wrap up. I have so much more that I could chat with you about, but you talk about in the book that we often this alluring siren song of greed. I love that line. So we often confuse success with making a lot of money, being financially wealthy. And you say, quote, "Do not let the profoundly alluring siren song of greed grip your heart." That is a good line. Why is greed, money? Why is that a trap? And if we become successful, if we find our calling, is it wrong to have a lot of money? But how do we guard our heart as we become successful in that area?
Well, Jesus was pretty clear that wealth is a master, so it threatens to control us, actually, to demand obedience from our life and so on. Of course, we never see it that way. We think, oh, you could give me loads of money and I'll master it. I'll use it. I can handle it. I can handle it. And some people can. Some people do have the character to be able to steward wealth. Lots of people don't. And lots of people succumb to that master, that sort of idol alternative to God. So I think my argument is more, make this different, set a different set of goals for yourself, which is, I want to grow. I want to become more like Jesus. I want to live into the fullness of what it's possible to create in one lifetime, and just make wealth peripheral to that. So it's having wealth, not having wealth, how much wealth, comparing yourself to other people is a distraction, actually, from your growth and development and your sanctification and your intimacy with God. And your love for your family and your impact on the world and all these things that actually measure a human life, that really matter, that count, that at the end of your life you'll be thinking about. The people you've impacted, the relationship you have with your family, the kind of person you are, the way you've walked in the world, the people you've harmed or the people that you've blessed. This is what you'll be calculating at the end of your life, not how much money you have. So don't get, fooled by that, distracted by that. So if you make this different goal, this different pathway, and you just go after that, chase after that, and wealth is a part of that journey, fine. That's fine. But never make it the goal, or you're in big trouble. You're probably going to be in big trouble. But again, I think, that threat of greed can take us off course. Yeah. Where you're thinking, this job pays more than that job, so I'm going to take it, when actually this other job, which pays less than this job, is better for me developmentally. It'll make a bigger impact in the world. And that's what I think you should be, that's the rubric that you should be, making the decision based on, not money.
Yeah, but that was one of the reasons why I erroneously chose the computer science field, is because I thought, I could make a lot of money. And in year 2000, it was all the rage. And, and I look back and I'm like, man, I was driven by the wrong thing. So yeah, that's really, really good help. Brian, I really enjoyed our conversation. Where can listeners find you on social media?
Oh, I'm out there, I'm not. I don't know. I'm on everything, probably somewhere.
Okay. What is your website?
I don't really have a website directly anymore. Obviously people can find the book anywhere that books are sold, Amazon, other places like that. And there probably is an author page actually on Amazon. So if you feel the need to know more about me, I'm probably, because I'm day 5 now, I've just turned 49. So because I'm in day 5, I'm kind of quieting down and moving out of the center and really enjoying the sort of mentor role, and moving out of kind of core creation, loving to work through others. So I'm a little more hard to find than I used to be. I'm a little more elusive.
No, that's okay. Let me actually redo the end, because I just threw that one in on the end. So let me just redo the end, and I'll talk about your book. So let me just do it one more time. Cut, break. Brian, I really enjoyed our conversation. Such good advice. So I want to encourage you all to check out this new book, The 6 Seasons of Calling, Discovering Your Purpose in Each Stage of Life, available now at Moody Publishing and on Amazon. Brian, thanks so much for being on the show today.
What a privilege. Thanks, man.
You're welcome. Okay, I'll stop that. And
That was
actually,
good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I just threw it up there. Yeah, so I'll stop that.